Welcome to the Dare and Well podcast with Rita Mercer.
You're no good to anybody if you can't take care of yourself first.
Hello, my dear. Welcome back to the Dare and Well podcast. Failure, burnout, health challenges, and adversity, they can either break us or they can make us. They can help make us by thinking about the foundation for something greater. So today we're going to be talking to Jim Laird. He's going to talk to us about ways to rebuild your life from the inside out. So I'm excited to welcome our guest today. Jim Laird is a veteran strength and conditioning coach with nearly 30 years of experience helping everyone, including women and men and youngsters and youth, to professional athletes, rebuild strength, energy, and resilience. He's also the founder of Vitality Brotherhood and Vitality Sisterhood. So I love that he didn't leave the women out. Jim's work centers on helping high-performing men and women simplify their health, recover from burnout, and stay consistent with the habits that actually move the needle. So again, I'm so excited to welcome Jim Laird to share with us. He's joining us from Nicaragua. And so again, welcome, Jim, to the podcast. Glad to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for happy to be here.
Awesome. So as we jump in today, I'd love for you to share your why. So when you think about your why, I'd love to hear kind of what I love about your story. You don't just know the knowledge of how to live healthy, but you've lived it yourself through different health challenges and you've learned how to overcome adversity. So talk about what motivates you to coach people from a health and a wellness perspective.
Well, I think my why has changed over the years, but currently my why is I just want to help others get better. So, but my big thing is always wanting to help other people. And originally, in the beginning, my why was more selfish. I did not have a very good childhood, and I was seeking validation. So I was looking to help others, people, to make myself feel better about myself and to get the gratification and the love that I didn't receive as a child. And so in the beginning, I'd be resentful if people didn't acknowledge my help. And later on in my career, I realized not everyone wants my help, and I just need to offer my help. And the people that are willing to listen and accept my help, that's great. And the people that aren't, maybe they're not ready, So I do a better job now of just speaking my truth, putting it out there, and then letting the people that hear about it. And I'm very lucky. I have a lot of people that I've mentored that are coaches in different places, and I've got several clients of mine that are now coaching and helping other people. So that's a big part of what drives me is basically just helping other people.
Gotcha. And what inspired you to, I guess a couple of things. What inspires you to start the Vitality Brotherhood and Sisterhood? And also what inspired you to move to Nicaragua?
Well, the men's groups, the communities were just kind of, I was coaching in person, and when I moved from Kentucky around COVID, when COVID or whatever you want to call it happened, they closed my gym down in Kentucky for about 8 months, and I decided that I needed to move to Florida. I didn't want to live somewhere where the government could shut my business down for 8 months. Didn't make me feel comfortable, so I moved to Florida. And I was working with a medical doctor. I worked with a medical doctor for 3 years, and I brought group coaching into his medical practice with great success. Having someone to make sure you follow through with the advice and the lifestyle tips and troubleshoot or give people habits that they can actually adhere to is really the key, whether it's, physical, training or coaching, or whether it's psychological help or if it's, medical practice stuff. It's really the consistency, the simplicity, and the adherence, the compliance to what you're actually trying to do that get your results in the long run and the habit change. And so I moved to Nicaragua originally. I was going to open a gym on the beach. and the medical doctor and I were going to bring people down here. And that didn't work out. It ended up being that the property wasn't really a good fit. And then the medical doctor his business kind of changed. And so I really liked being here in Nicaragua. I didn't really want to leave because the cost of living is so wonderful. And I just like being here. And so I stayed. And that's when I started Vitality Brotherhood, Vitality Sisterhood. I went out on my own and I wanted to have support groups for, high achievers that are working really hard that are not getting results. And that's typically my typical client I've had over the years are people that are working really hard. They're highly successful. They've either burned the candle at both ends and it's finally caught up with them, or they're gaining weight or whatever it is. And the harder they work, the worse it gets. So I'm really good at troubleshooting that and really help guide people and figure out what the root issue is and help them, work through it. And if I can't help, I refer them out to somebody else. Then once I was here, I moved away from the beach and I moved more inland, and I ran into a couple of baseball players here that recognized me from the internet. I started helping them, and a couple of the teams here asked me to help. And before you knew it, I was working for Dusty Baker, working with the team, the national team that went to the World Baseball Classic back in March here. We were 1 out away from our first victory. And so that was a really fun experience. And now I work for a professional. Last year, I worked for the Dantos, who won the championship. This year, I work for the Boar, which is a professional baseball league team. And so I work with them. And that kind of fulfills my in-person coaching. It's definitely some of the hardest work I've ever done because I don't speak Spanish well. And I'm exposing them to a lot of things they've never been exposed to before. And so the language barrier combined with just a different style of their approach to training than in the US or Canada is a little bit of a challenge. And then also the pay, obviously I'm not getting paid anywhere near what I would get paid in the United States, but the benefit is I get social connection. I get to coach people in person. So that's a huge plus. And then I work online as well. So the balance between making sure that I'm taking care of myself and, working in person here and doing my virtual work is a little bit of a challenge that keeps me on my toes. And so I have to, follow my own advice, but that's essentially how I ended up here. And I never would have guessed that I'd be coaching baseball in Nicaragua. I worked with professional baseball players. I've worked with college baseball teams. I've worked with high school teams in the US, but I never would have expected to be coaching baseball in Nicaragua, particularly at the highest level. So
that's cool. So Jim, tell me, you talked about high performers, high achievers. Why do you think they burn out despite doing all the right things?
Well, a lot of the times they think they're doing the right things because that's what's worked for them in the past. So they think they're doing the right things. And if they think they're doing the right things and in their mind, they're doing the right things. So a lot of it might be, looking at their strategy, and that strategy might have worked when they were 20, 30 years old. But now that they're 40 or 50, it doesn't work that well. So what happens is people that are high performers, they don't understand that hard work always doesn't equal results. So if I've got a baseball bat, I'm trying to chop down a tree, that's not going to work very well. But they think if the harder they work, the better results they're going to get. So they don't have the right tool for the job. So a lot of times in the past, people that are hard workers, particularly business people, they've been rewarded by working super, super hard. And they think more effort. For example, I had a lady named Rachel. You can check out her before and after, her testimonial. I did a podcast with her. She was basically a mother of three. She was a pharmacist. She was working 3 jobs, and she was training 5 days a week. And she started gaining weight. And her coach was like, we need to do more cardio. So she started going in twice a day, right? And so she was doing 2 cardio sessions a day, or 2 sessions a day. Plus she was working 3 jobs and had 3 kids. And she came to me because she was exhausted. So she thought more effort equaled better results. And so the first thing we did was cut her back to like working out, just strength training 3 days a week, walking. We got her to sleep more. And it's funny, she'd notice when she'd go on vacation and she would get away from training, she felt better. She wasn't holding as much water. She would actually lose weight when she went on vacation and quit working out. So with her, is getting it in her head that she had to put more effort into the rest than the training. And she ended up getting some incredible results. But she just had it in her brain. And I did a whole hour podcast with her talking to her about the mental side of it, how hard it was for her to like actually take the time to take care of themselves. And I use or herself. I use the analogy all the time of you're on the airplane, the mask drops. What do they tell you to do? Put the mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. Because if you pass out trying to help the other person, you're gone.
You're no
and
good.
the other person, if you're a child, they're gone too. So you're no good to anybody if you can't take care of yourself first. And she talked about that, how she wasn't a very good partner. She wasn't a very good, her kids called her mean mommy because she was so tired and so exhausted, so she's like, what do I do with my free time? I'm like, because we cut her working out back. She's like, I'm like, play with your kids, like, have a glass of wine, sit on your back porch and relax. Like, go for a walk, do something fun that you haven't done in a long time. Go out with some of your friends. She's like, oh, okay. So a lot of times with hard workers, it's just getting them to understand that you have to do maintenance on yourself. And that means slowing down enough to actually do the maintenance and taking the time to like maybe go for a walk at lunch, or, like holding all your calls and like, having your lunch and putting your phone down and actually chewing the food up and not just like being on the computer and on the phone while shoveling your face full of food at the same time. Taking the time to get outside, taking the time to relax so you can work harder. The goal isn't to become a Buddhist monk. The goal is to like recharge and reload so you can continue to focus and work hard. I call it the stress bathtub. You have this bathtub, and basically once it fills to the top, it spills over, and you could get an autoimmune disease or a heart attack, or, it could be just depression or whatever. That bathtub spills over and it turns into all sorts of different health issues, depending on your genetics and other factors. But you have a drain in the bathtub. As you get older, the bathtub gets smaller, but the rest and the I call it working in makes the bathtub bigger. That's like, walking for leisure, good nutrition, sleep, getting outside, getting sunlight, good relationships. These are all things that make our bathtub bigger and empty the bathtub. Our modern life with the phones, the notifications, the emails is making our bathtub fill up quicker. Sometimes hard workouts can do that too. We want to make sure that sometimes we work out to challenge ourselves to like improve strength and get better. And sometimes we want to work out to restore ourselves, to put energy back into the system. So that's what I teach people is like, what does your body need? Does your body need to push harder, or does it need to rest? Do you need to be like, balance? Yeah, teaching people how to work with their body. Because a lot of people in their early, 20s and 30s, for me too, like I drove my body like a stolen car. And so, when I got sick, I had to learn, when I got colitis, I had to learn like, okay, I need to learn how to relax. I need to learn how to like shut my mind off. I need to learn how to sleep. These are all things that were foreign to me. It's just like more caffeine, turn the music up, work harder, and then one day I started having blood in my bowel movements, and that was a huge wake up call for me that some things needed to change.
Yeah, that must have been scary. So learning how to listen to your body. How does someone, a high achiever, know when they've been running on stress for too long, emotionally or physically? So you gave some examples with that testimonial. Is there other early warning signs people can notice?
Well, it can be like low libido. It can be just being emotional. It can be binge eating. It can be all sorts of different things. Like you're exhausted during the day. Like you're literally like your head is falling at work, and then you go home to go to sleep, and you wake up tired but wired. That's a really big sign that you're completely exhausted. You can't go to sleep. You're coming home and you're drinking in order to go to sleep. That's another big warning sign too. Anxiety is, depression is another sign. And drinking will help you go to sleep, but it will destroy your sleep, and you won't be able to stay asleep. So alcohol is a depressant, but it also affects your deep sleep, and it will cause many, many issues over time. Binge eating at night, also being ravenously hungry and eating lots of junk food at night, is another sign that you're in a bad place.
Gotcha. Okay. Good practical things to think about. So I know you already gave a few different ideas when you think about like simple ways to take care of yourself. So what are some other ideas? So I know you talked about protein, walking, hydrating. What are some like I have the 5 fundamentals, which is basically
And I try to start with sustainable, simple things because it comes down to what you actually are going to do. And most people, they don't need fancy. They just need a few simple things. And I think the most important one is the walk outside 10 minutes, 3 times a day. And one, that fixes your circadian rhythm. Most people spend their entire life indoors. 97%. Most people spend 97% of their day inside in front of a screen. And so the LED in the screen, it has blue light, and there's nothing wrong with blue light. There's blue light occurs in nature. The problem is with the screen or the computer, it's only blue. Okay. We used to have incandescent bulbs, and that's better because there's red, and red is the more calming part of the spectrum, like fire. And so in nature, blue never happens by itself. There's always different colors of the spectrum in sunlight. And so it tells your brain what hormones to produce. Like in the morning, it spikes your cortisol. You want to spike your cortisol with the sun and movement. Then there's cortisol supposed to go up. And then throughout the day, it's supposed to drop. And then in the evening, your body ramps down based on what frequency and light frequencies are coming from the sun. And of course, you've got vitamin D, and the darker your skin, the more sun you actually need. That's why many dark-skinned people really struggle in the United States with higher rates of heart disease, obesity, because they're designed to be closer to the equator and they're designed to get more sun, right? And so people that live at more northern latitudes with darker skins, they really struggle. And it's really sad because nobody tells them that. Someone who has dark skin like yourself needs like 10 times the amount of sun I do. Because my ancestors evolved at higher latitude. The lighter your skin, the less sun you need. The less sun you need to survive. So that's something that's kind of been forgotten. But the walking outside basically lowers blood sugar. If you do it as an observational exercise, as opposed to exercise, like trying hard, if you're flowing and you're relaxed and you're basically observing and breathing through your nose, then it becomes like stress management, right?
Okay.
So you're managing blood sugar. It lowers blood sugar at the same rate of a metformin. Getting out in nature, listening to the birds reduces anxiety. You're getting vitamin D. You're producing hormones, particularly in the morning. You're getting your thyroid, your testosterone. All these things are basically managed by the sun. And you're fixing your circadian rhythm. Your immune system is also run by sunlight. So your sleep's going to improve. You're going to be less stressed. Your resting heart rate's going to go down. Your fitness level is going to improve. You walk 3 times a day. You're actually going to burn some body fat when you do that. So basically, you checked off 1 million boxes with this one really simple activity. And so I think, and what happens is when you're not sleep deprived, then you have an easier time regulating your appetite. Sleep deprivation leads to, sleep deprivation combined with ultra processed food leads to just being ravenously hungry. And I think that's one of the reasons today why so many people are reaching for GLPs is because our body makes GLPs internally. It has a system to regulate appetite, but when you're sleep deprived, that's completely gone. So I think that's one of the reasons why people just can't stop eating is because they're basically, they're up on their phone at 11, 12 o'clock at night, watching Netflix, and then they're not getting enough sleep. 1 or 2 days of like under 7 hours sleep is, you're basically equivalent to you being impaired, like having, too many drinks and trying to drive. So it's going to basically make a difference in your ability to make decisions. I think it's one of the reasons they do it by design, because if you're sleep deprived and you're, addicted to your phone, it's going to make it much easier to sell you things, right? If you're present and logical and in a good place and you're not emotional, you're going to be less of an impulse buyer. So I think it's, I'll put my tinfoil hat on and kind of say, hey, it's kind of like that by design. The internet is kind of like a giant casino. It's kind of like the slot machine thing. You just kind of keep pulling the lever, So that the walking alone, if more people just did that, and I think that's one of the reasons why there's so many less obese people in the 70s, because in the 1970s, as I'm sure you remember, people walked outside. People did manual labor. They spent a lot more time outside, and so people today are not doing that. And that's why there's
kids.
Yeah,
kids are on their video games. They don't play outside.
I know. Even here, it's getting bad. So that's, I think, is a huge part of it. And then protein. Eat enough protein at every meal. Most people should eat a fistful of protein at every meal. Lean protein, preferably. Like the steak, chicken, fish, those things, if you do that, it's going to help regulate blood sugar. Most people don't understand that most of the hormones and the chemicals, particularly the chemicals in your brain that are required for you to have a good night's sleep, come from amino acids. So if you undereat protein, you're not going to have the ability to sleep as well. You're not going to be able to relax at night as easily. And then it just builds muscle mass. It helps control blood sugar. It's more, it fills you up, so if you get a nice, chunk of protein at every meal, you're not going to be as hungry. And then, of course, the more muscle you have, the higher your metabolism and the easier it is to control your, insulin resistance and all that good stuff. And then high quality water, glacier water, the water that comes in the glacier bottle in the US is the highest quality water you can buy at the store. If you're going to filter your water, you need to put some minerals back into it, some sea salt or maybe something called concentrates that you can get. But even I've had plenty of people that just increase tap water. I'm not a big fan of tap water. I think there's a lot of garbage in it, but you're better off drinking more water, tap water than not enough water at all. Because most people are drinking, Diet Coke and lots of juices and sodas and coffee and energy drinks. So they're dehydrated. So, if you can't do the bottled water or high quality spring water, then at least get more water in general. That helps regulate appetite. It's just going to help your whole body, detox and just keep you healthy in general. And then the next one is get the lights off at night. Essentially, there's actually a new bulb. If you go to my website, vitalitybrotherhood.com, go to recommended products, there's a bulb that you can it changes the light cycle with the day. You can hit the switch, flip it on once, it's morning light, flip it on twice, it's midday, flip it on 3 times, it's like late evening, flip it on 4 times, it's nighttime. And so it's like the first bulb that I know of that's LED that actually mimics the actual sun spectrum so that you can have it on at night and it's not going to affect your ability to sleep. So there are options like that, but candlelight's really good, or just making sure it's not a big overhead light. The light's at a little lower level. I turn my phone screen red. I have some blue blocking glasses. So I try, as soon the sun goes down around 6:30 here, so I try to get the lights off or dim. I also have a red light panel that I leave on in the background, so that it's more like having a fireplace on. But you just want to avoid the bright blue lights at night and the screens. And if you have to watch something, you can always wear blue blocking glasses, or you can buy some software that turns the screen red. And then the last one I think is probably next to walking is the most important, is social connection. It's great that I can talk to you on the computer, but nothing beats interaction in person. And there's a book called The Great Cholesterol Myth that I used to hand out to all my clients, a lot of my older gentlemen. And this comes into the work harder, smarter, not harder type thing. Most of my clients would come to me that were older, 50, 60 years old, and would be in pain. And my first question is like, are you on a statin drug? And of course, I'm not a medical doctor, but one of the number one side effects of a statin drug is pain. And so I would give them that book, and then they could read it and it would help them make a decision, and they could decide with their doctor. But the vast majority of I'd say 98%, 95% of the guys that went off the statin, their pain was gone within a week. And so and same thing with like women in birth control. Like I've got women that are trying to lose body fat. How hard do you think it is going to be to lose body fat if you're on a hormone that's telling your body it's pregnant, right? You're not going to have an easy time losing body fat. So, or antidepressants, like, women are like, I'm trying to lose body fat, I'm going to lose weight, and they're on an antidepressant or they're on birth control. That's like trying to drive with your emergency brake on. So that's all part of like, who are you? What are you doing? What's your goal? And like, what do you got going on? So a lot of times it's about educating people, but to get back to why the social connection is so important, there was a town in Pennsylvania where the people in the town, and you can probably relate to this from the 1970s, they all smoked, they drank, they didn't eat the greatest food, but their life expectancy wasn't any lower than anywhere else. And it's because they all went to church together. They went out to bars together. They had good community, and that's something we've lost today. People are being sucked into the phone. And I know with me here in Nicaragua, I really struggled with that when I first moved here, because I didn't really know that many people. I didn't speak the language, and I was working virtually, and I started getting sucked into the phone. I was watching good stuff, But, I was watching history videos and things like that. That's my kryptonite. But, when you're doom scrolling and you're like looking at that all the time, it sucks you in. And
Yeah.
so people, before I left Tampa, even here in Nicaragua, there'll be people on their phones having a conversation. I left Tampa and 2.5, 3 years ago, and there was like a group of teenagers, and they were like 10 of them, and they were all on their phone having a conversation through the text, just sitting there. And that's, if you look at like 1970 versus now, and the obesity rate is like quadrupled, probably even gone up times 5. And the subtle differences in pictures and like how many people were overweight. There's very few overweight people back then, but the main difference is a more outdoor lifestyle, less processed food, and then 3 channels on the TV, right? And of course, like you remember 10:30, 11 o'clock came around, the bars on the TV went up, and
Yep,
that was
I
it.
remember that.
Like, so people weren't sitting around at 2 o'clock in the morning on Netflix and on TikTok. And so we've got broken circadian rhythm combined with just, like having a slot machine in your hand and foods that just, you can't stop eating. So that's a big difference between now. But those are my 5 fundamental habits. And some people start with 1 or 2, but the goal is to get people doing all of them eventually. And if you've got those habits as your foundation, you're going to be in a pretty good place. And then, is your goal performance? Is your goal to be a performance beast, or is your goal health? Look good naked and look good and feel good. If your goal is just to look good and feel good, you flirt with performance, you don't marry it. Now, if your goal is to be a performance beast and train at the highest levels, you're going to have to marry it. And there's obviously consequences that come with that. And I compare it to a performance car. If you're going to buy a fast car, you're going to turbocharge it, supercharge it. You're going to have better tires. You're going to have to do more maintenance. You have to change the oil more often. The harder you drive the car, the more maintenance is going to be required of it. So that's basically, what I talk to guys about and help them work their way through.
That's good. That's good, Jim. As we wrap up today, what are some words of wisdom that you want people to walk away with?
Start where you are. If you're in Tampa Bay, you can't drive to Colorado starting in St. Louis. So, part of the thing here. That's right. People will come to me and they don't understand. They've dug themselves a hole that's 20 feet deep. They don't understand that it's going to take some time to fill that hole back in. And you might have to do it 1 teaspoon at a time. Sometimes it's a shovelful. Sometimes it's a teaspoon. But you have to start where you are. And then be still and know. There's amazing power in silence. And I think one of the things that our world has done is taken silence away from us. And silence is, and I was afraid of silence for so many years. One of the reasons I worked so hard and I trained so hard and I did combat sports and played football is because I couldn't sit quietly, because I had things in my soul, in my mind, in my heart that I couldn't deal with. I didn't have the ability to deal with it. So I basically distracted myself and worked my ass off to just push that stuff in the closet. Silence is going to reveal some things to you about yourself that you don't like. And instead of pushing it into the closet, just watch it and deal with it and put it behind you. You might need to forgive some people. That's something that I had to do eventually. That was a huge turnaround for me. And then, once you forgive some people and you don't have hate and resentment to drive you anymore, and there's a lot of very successful people, athletes in particular, that are driven by hate and resentment. Once they put that behind them, they got to kind of rediscover why they want to train. That was really hard for me when I got rid of my hate, my anger, my resentment. It improved my health dramatically, but it took me about 4 or 5 months to learn how to train because I actually loved myself and not because I was managing hatred and anger. So that's kind of a little offside topic, but don't be afraid of silence. You need silence. And then work in so you can work out. And the harder you push, the more you have to put energy and gas back into the tank. And most people today are just going, and they're not doing anything to put gas back in the system. And so if you that's where the 10-minute walks are so great, because it does that automatically. And so, that's essentially what I would tell people is start where you are. Don't be afraid of silence, and work in, so you can work out and push hard.
That's good. Good words of wisdom, Jim.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for joining today. I'd love for you to share like how guests can, how the audience can connect with you, how they can go deeper if they want to build more strength from the inside out. How do you best serve them, and what are ways they can connect with you?
Well, the best way to connect with me is go to Vitality Brotherhood. But I have a way you can join the women's and the men's group there. And I have a group where you can come into the community, ask questions. I do educational calls every week. I also do coaching. I do group coaching and individual coaching as well for people that are really wanting to get serious. And it's mainly accountability. I mean, that's the main thing is we come up with a plan and we might discover some things that are underlying root causes just because I've worked with so many people. Like, for example, I had a couple ladies here recently that were working with me and they had pain. One had an autoimmune disease. I started working with them and we were getting some really good improvement, but I didn't really think they were getting as much improvement as they should. And I saw some red flags and some warnings, and I sent them to like a pelvic floor specialist, and both of them ended up having severe endometriosis, which was the underlying root driver that was like just absolutely putting their body in an immense amount of stress. So they've gotten that taken care of, and they've been able to make some changes in their lifestyle and stuff to kind of hopefully keep that from coming back. But that was affecting their breathing. It was affecting their ability to sleep and relax. I mean, it was really bad. It was some of the worst cases they'd ever seen. And all the doctors had missed it, you know? So, and a lot of times I work with people and they're breathing and they can't breathe because their nose is blocked. And then we send them to an ear, nose, and throat specialist or a dentist, and they're able to do some things with them and their breathing improves. And then all of a sudden they sleep better. You know, all of a sudden they start losing weight. So many times there's things that are often overlooked. Or another example is a lot of people don't have gallbladders. They get their gallbladder taken out. Usually it's autoimmune related. The doctors don't explain to them, you know, gallbladder basically stores bile, and that's what helps you break up fat when you eat it. And people will be trying to lose weight or they'll be really tired and they don't take digestive support. And then they haven't changed their diet. So when you don't have a gallbladder, you don't digest fat as well. So it's not you want to go on a low fat diet. You just want to eat less fatty food. And then you need to take a supplement that has like ox bile in it. Now Food Super Enzyme is a great one. It has ox bile and digestive support. And you need to take that for the rest of your life, because what happens is if you don't have bile in the system, you can't break up the fat and you can't absorb fat soluble vitamins. So I've helped hundreds of people that basically were really struggling. They're bloated, gassy, trying to lose weight. They felt terrible. They had no energy. And we found out they had no gallbladder. They're doing tons of cardio. And it's like, all of a sudden we give them like 2 tablets each meal. And all of a sudden they drop 10 pounds just because they're not as inflamed. They start feeling better. They have better energy. They sleep better. All of a sudden they get better results. And it's not because we worked harder. It's just because we found something that was making things more efficient. Same thing with the birth control. You know, if I got a woman that's on birth control, it's going to be very difficult for her to lose body fat. So that's a lot of what I do. Is I'm like a little detective, and we kind of go through the history and kind of figure out and try a few different things and build a foundation so that we can stack habits on top of each other. But that's essentially what I do. And you can go to Vitality Brotherhood. There's a place to book a call. If you want to just talk to me directly, you can join the communities. There's also a free guide there. If you're burned out, I have a simple free guide. You can get on my email list, and I send out valuable information all the time. I'm not just trying to sell you something every day. So happy to have you in the community.
Awesome. And the community's on Facebook?
No, it's on school. There's a women's group and a men's group. So if you go to vitalitybrotherhood.com, you can join either group. Yeah. And that way I interact. I do 2 calls a week on there for free. Interact, and then you can get into one of my coaching programs if you want more personalized, individualized service. I do individual work, and then I do group work as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Jim, for dropping some words of wisdom and some different ways to just live well mentally and physically. I definitely am appreciative for that information. All right, guys. Thank you again for joining the Darren Well podcast. Wishing you guys a beautiful day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you hear this episode. Until next time, keep living, keep loving, and keep daring well. Take care, guys. God bless. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Daring Well podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue exploring the world of holistic wellness, be sure to subscribe to the Daring Well podcast so you never miss an episode filled with transformative conversations and actionable advice. Thank you again for being part of the Daring Well podcast community. Together, let's dare to live well in mind, body, and spirit.